Well, welcome, everyone. You're in for a treat when you hear that tune because it's another week of the RecPoker Podcast. I am filling in for the guy with the best job in the world, Jim Reed, and because he is still playing in the Irish Poker Open. But I am filling in. I'm Chris Jones. You can find me 5B5 on socials or 5B5 in the PokerStars home game. And I'm really excited to be here this week talking to Rob Gardner in just a moment. I'm proud to remind you before we begin that, as always, we are brought to you by Running Aces. They're the official sponsor of the RecPoker Podcast and encourage you to go find out more about them at runaces.com. Most of what we do at RecPoker is free. We're a largely volunteer-based organization, so we really depend on support from our sponsors and our premium members who take part in our training material and study opportunities for only $22 a month. So sign up for free account at RecPoker today. All it takes is an email address and a smile. And as you all know, we love supporting food banks around here. So if you want to check out the perks of our premium membership, without that $22 a month, just make a donation to any local food bank, send us the receipt, and we'll happily send you your first month of premium for free as a way of saying thanks. So with all that kind of out of the way, before we get Rob on the show, I wanted to remind you we're always joined by our Wrecking Crew members. We kind of have a panel committee who kind of helps us run the show. And tonight I'm joined by three of our illustrious panel members. And Lorianne, I hear that you had a little situation this weekend or last tournament you played where you got the clock called on you.
Yes, I did, Chris. I soft bubbled day 1B of the Win 400 last Tuesday and 4 away from the money. I was in only the second hand. I guess I should back up a little bit and tell you the story. It just gotten moved to this table and I moved right into the big blind and it was a heads up pot against the cutoff. And long story short, we get it all in on the turn. I flopped top 2 pair. He turned a set of 4s. So first hand at the new table, I lose half my chip stack. And didn't play another hand until this hand, blind versus blind. It was a limp pot, and I had the table chip leader on my left. So I just limped in with Queen Jack, and I bet the Queen high flop, and he called. It came Queen 9 something. A king of spades on the turn, I check, and he just throws out a stack of 5K chips, which to me didn't make any sense considering how short I was. I'm thinking, why not just put me all in? So in the process of trying to think about this hand, literally about maybe 20, maybe not even 30 seconds stop. Someone said something, and I said, seat 3, I asked the dealer, did he call the clock? And he says, yes. And I said, literally, you just called the clock on me? And he says, it's been over 2 minutes. To which I responded, there is a tournament clock right above your head. It hasn't even been 1 minute. His response was then, well, I always call the clock. That was his, basically for my tournament life, 4 people from bagging, and he decides to call the clock. And we have 40-minute levels. So the floor comes over, and I tried to tell her that it hadn't even been a full minute. She asked the dealer. Unfortunately, he gave a non-response response. So she did start a 30-second countdown. And by that point, my thought process, and I got rattled. I have to admit, he totally rattled me. And I just basically was just like, screw it. And I just folded. And I would find later on, once I busted, I did ask the guy next to me, he was kind enough to, I said, you got to let me know. I said, you bluffed me there. He says, yes. He admitted that he did. And that the guy calling the clock on me actually helped him out.
Right,
so
right.
So unfortunately, we had 311 players, 38 bagged. I went out in 41st. And to add insult to injury, the guy who was in seat 3 to call the clock on me, he was one of the people that busted me. So
come on.
Just a double kick to the gut.
It's not even right. It's not even right.
Just a double. My last 6 bigs with ace 3 of diamonds in the cutoff. I shove. The button calls, and he calls in the small blind, and they both have ace jack, and they ace jack high wins. So they chop my chips. Just to kick me while I was.
I mean, you never want a soft bubble. You never want a soft bubble in sort of that kind of scenario. You never want to have, these kind of like weird, tilty clock calling moments. But we were talking before the show began a little bit about calling the clock, and I thought I would sort of like kind of kick this off and have a little bit of a conversation of like, when do you call the clock, or when do you think when do you, for anyone, Joe, John, Lorianne, when do you call the clock, or do you ever call the clock?
I can honestly say I've never called the clock on anybody, and I've never been called the clock. That's my own. As I was saying before the show, that's one of my leaks, is that I feel intense pressure to get my decisions made quickly, regardless, and so I'm usually too fast. But for me, it's a game, it's a thinking game, and calling the clock is nothing more than trying to cut off somebody thinking through a problem. So I don't, I get why people do it at times, particularly if somebody's doing it for the purposes of kind of slowing it down so that you can get through blinds. But it'd be a really, really long situation before I might even call it. I would probably just sit there and wait.
And that's what we said before we went on air. I said I may have called the clock once, maybe twice in the entire time I've been playing. And it had to be a really extreme situation. And also if it's someone that has shown that they will just take every hand, even pre-flop or whatever, for no reason whatsoever. But other than that, it's just, it's a real extreme situation. And like we already discussed, in this situation was basically for my tournament life, 4 spots from bagging. So to say I wasn't happy was an understatement. And yes, I did give him an earful. It wasn't very nice. It wasn't ladylike, but at the moment I just didn't give a damn. I made it known how I felt about it.
People should know I've played at Resorts World with Lorianne at the table, and we won't talk about the fact that she didn't remember I had talked to her, but we'll just move on beyond that. You have to understand how beloved she is. She walks in, everybody knows who she is, everybody's happy to play, everybody knows how she's played over the last week. So this guy must have really been a jerk to call the clock on Lorianne. So
yeah.
Well, I think jerk is a nice word to say. Yes.
Family show.
Yeah, it's a family show.
I don't think I have ever called the clock or have ever had the clock called on me. The only time I really, really wanted to call a clock was I was playing at Canterbury Park. It was actually one of the time tournaments, simulating a cash game. And one of the guys there was so stoned out of his mind that he was taking forever. I mean, even his pre-flop actions were taking like 30 seconds. And people would complain. It's going like, what? It hasn't been that long, because clearly his sense of time was completely gone. But in general, I don't. Partially, that's probably because of my need to be seen as a nice guy, despite all of the horrible things I say to people. And I also have the same affliction that Joe does, is that I try really hard not to slow down the game. So I will almost never take enough time to have the clock called on me.
I think I might have a more hardened heart than the three of you, because I have called the clock many a time. I will do it for kind of like, I won't do it usually when other people are in the hand. I will do it when I am in the hand and I have put out like a large bet, like on a river, and I've given them 3+ minutes and they're just staring at me, and I'm tired of it. So I'll call the clock in that moment. And the other time I'll be really ruthless on the clock is when we're on break. Like that last hand when we're on break, like I want my break. I'm not going to sit there and let my break wind away. So I will call the clock very quickly in those spots, within probably 30 seconds. Like if the break has already started and we're still in a hand, I'm kind of ruthless on that that spot.
That is ruthless.
I think it's an interesting conversation, though, if you take a big step back from the game in general, because to some degree, it's like what your conceptualization of the game is becomes a determination of whether or not you think the clock should ever be called on somebody. It's like, well, what are the things that matter, right? It's like, does having the break make a difference in terms of your ability to play? Or does giving somebody 10 minutes to think about things, or letting somebody stare at you in the hope that somehow, I don't know, about a tear's going to run down and give away, the fact that you're bluffing. Like all of those things go into a person's conceptualization of what the game of poker really is. And there's huge connections, I think, to like string bets or other angles that people will try to take, and whether those are against the rules, part of the game. Can you be just a big jerk at the table and try to make everybody angry at you the whole time? Is that part of the game? And for thinking about what a player thinks about that will tell you a lot about whether or not they're going to get the clock either called on them or called the clock on somebody. It doesn't mean you're a jerk, Chris. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying it's the conceptualization of the game.
No, I might be right. Like I might be, but I might just be less patient. Maybe, who knows?
I don't know. There have been times other people have called the clock at the table I'm at, and I'm relieved because it's like, oh, thank goodness. And then it takes that pressure off me. I don't even have the option of calling it anymore, even if I wanted to.
Even though that's one of those, we're all thinking the same thing, but no one will pull the trigger. And actually, I think I also mentioned before we went on the air is that I remember, and I think it was on Orleans Sunday tournament, I did have the clock called on me. And when they came over the floor, asked, the usual, has she had enough time? Even I admitted, I said, yes, I've had enough time. So, because it was, I can't remember the hand, but I do remember I had taken a long time, and honestly was surprised someone didn't call the clock. So it was I ended up making the right call. I do remember that, but yeah, I let them know that yes, the clock was called. And it just, again, but just thinking about, that was one of the cases where, if I recall, I had top pair on the board, and the guy literally, it was an overbet shove on the river, and again, playing the hand from start to finish took a few minutes, and again, where the bet didn't make sense, but it was for my tournament life. And they did call the clock, but like I said, I did make the right call. It was one of those where you make the call and the shoulders go, so you make the right call. You're like, yes, I made the right call. But yes,
there's nothing better in poker than you're good. You're good.
You make the call, and it was just like, but yes, and it was kind of funny when you mentioned about break, Chris, too, because like I just wish I remember what I had, because I took so long to call the clock, but that most of the table stayed to see the hand because they wanted to know what I was thinking, what the other guy had. So that was just one of those where everybody, if you've ever done it, you just feel so good when you thought it out. Yes, you took longer than probably should, but that you finally came to the right conclusion, especially when it was for your tournament life, and you just see the shoulders go. That's one of the best feelings in poker.
We could talk about this for a little while longer, but I'm going to call the clock on us, and I'm going to bring in our guest tonight. We're joined by Rob, the one and only Rob Gardner. Excited to have you back.
I thought about calling clock on you guys just to be funny, but then I was like, I can't do that as a guest. I'm not invisible producer Rob today.
No, you're invisible. You were invisible guest Rob, but now you're visible guest Rob. Rob, have you ever called the clock on somebody?
My favorite thing to do is to call clock on the asshole that's calling clock on everybody. That's pretty much the only time I've ever done it, is when some guy's being a jerk calling clock on people, and I'll just start calling clock on him like every chance I get.
I can't say I hate that.
That's like you get firing back and forth. I like it.
It's fun, because it feels like you're being doing something wrong, and yet it's so soothing. It's like meditation. It's beautiful.
Well, Rob, welcome to the show, first of all. And as you know, we often start all these interviews with the same question. But I'm actually curious to hear your take on this, because you've had so many different hats and roles in the poker world. So how would you define your current role in the poker world?
I knew this question was coming. And the funny thing is, I've got a meeting with Jim when he gets back to actually discuss this topic, because I don't know. I'm kind of at a crossroads right now where I could go a couple different directions with it. And I'm kind of torn on whether I want to be a out there person, or whether I just want to kind of sit on the sidelines behind the scenes, hang out and rec poker, make some cool content, and just kick butt in poker and call it a day. My younger days, I wanted to do big things in this industry and be big in the space and be a big influencer and all that stuff. But I'm not a schmoozer. I don't know how Jim goes out and engages with all these people and rub elbows and builds all these friendships, and like that stuff exhausts me, man. Like it wears me out. So I don't know. We'll see. I do love training people, mentoring people, helping people reach their goals and their dreams. It's something I've always loved to do in any industry. But that's a very daunting task that can burn yourself out quick. So we'll find out. I actually don't have a good answer for that one.
So it's like to be determined, I guess.
Yeah. We'll see what Jim says.
Yeah,
it's Jim's. It's all on Jim's shoulders.
We're all living in Jim's world, right? We're just guests.
100%.
Yeah, for sure. Well, recently, to kick us off, I think to get this conversation even started a little bit further, you had a tweet that came out said that GTO is overrated. And there was a little bit of a reaction to that. So let's talk about that. What do you mean that GTO is overrated?
Yeah, so I think that there is a complex, and maybe Joe will have a better technical neuroscience explanation for this, but human beings hate not having the answer, and they especially hate trying to come up with an answer in a situation where they have incomplete information, because they don't want to be guilty or held accountable for a decision they made based on information they didn't have. And so here we are, we play this game of imperfect, incomplete information. We don't know all the cards. We don't know what our opponents are holding. We don't necessarily even know our opponents. And we're tasked with making these complex decisions. And someone brings GTO along with this sales pitch of like, hey, if you learn GTO, you can't be exploited. And the whole world goes bonkers, because now it's like, oh, this is awesome. If I just memorize this really infinitely complex solution, then as long as I use it in game, I can't be taken advantage of. Therefore, I can't do anything wrong. Therefore, I don't have to be accountable for my mistakes. And it creates this peace and satisfaction. And so they're sitting there like remembering some solver, node that they looked at 6 months ago, button versus big blind, where this guy tripled off and they're supposed to call with all of their third pairs and they shove all their chips in. And then the old man flips over the nuts and it's the first bet he's made in 7 hours because he literally only ever bets the nuts. And then they don't know what happened. GTO is a perfect solution for a perfect world, and we play poker in literally the absolute opposite of that. So to sit there and spend hundreds of hours using memorization and muscle memory as a learning tool to practice a game in a simulation that doesn't exist in real life is, one, incredibly too inefficient, two, incredibly ineffective. And unfortunately, a lot of poker players get swept up in this because they see all the big players using it, and they end up learning a lot of habits that are unexploitable, but are actually really, really bad for the games they play in.
I think that's the key, the games they play in.
Yep.
That's, yes. Because like you said, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, if you're playing GTO, you probably really suck at game selection.
Yeah.
It's 2025. There are terrible games online. There are terrible games on live. Why are you playing in a game where you need to regularly use GTO? That's like my first question for people that want to do this. Like, you're probably not playing in the right games, honestly, at that point.
Or I was going to say reference, like if Rick and I are doing a date day and we're playing the nightly at South Point or something like that, it's not a heavily GTO field, no. Or even the dailies at Resorts World. That's not a heavily, so you have to know what you're playing, and like I said, what it works or where it will work and where it won't work. And like I said, so in that I agree with you. I had to learn that kind of the hard way. I'm not honestly a GTO person. I'm more of a field person, but I did kind of dabble in it because it was the big thing, so to speak. And I thought, well, maybe I'm missing something here or doing something totally wrong. And I'm still like, or what's the term? I'm meh on GTO. So hopefully I don't firestorm with that. No,
Lorianne.
Rob,
that's why you're good.
Oh, I don't know. All right. Keep bubbling and self-bubbling stuff, but I don't know.
Let me devil's advocate for a second. And
feel
ask
free.
You. So I would say if I'm channeling my inner Andrew Brokus or my inner, people who I really respect, who kind of understand the theory much better than I do, they would say our goal isn't to play GTO, but to know GTO so that we know what our baseline is and how we can then, we can't really know what an exploit is until we know what our baseline is. So how do you think about that?
It is a great sales pitch in an industry that is absolutely overflowing with group speak. In other words, there are a lot of people at the top of this industry who are just talking, and they hear things and then they start repeating them. And before you know it, it's just everywhere, and nobody's actually vetting whether these things are true. So let's break this down, right? Because conceptually it sounds good, right? If you learn the baselines, if you learn GTO, and then someone deviates one way, you can figure out how to deviate the other way. Problem number one, nobody knows GTO. Like, there is literally infinite numbers of situations. And these infinite number of situations, I don't know if you guys know this, like every time you shuffle a deck, it's in an order that's never been shuffled before in the history of the universe. Like, that's how many combinations of deck shuffles there are. So you're trying to learn millions and millions of different situations. And then GTO has an insane amount of nuance. So while there's some things in GTO that you can pick out that are kind of more straightforward, there are really weird situations like unblocking backdoor flush draws that your opponent may or may not have. Weird situations where having one of one suit and one of another suit will lead a hand to be a better raise than a call. You have all of these partial frequencies that literally nobody can even begin to memorize when, you know, you look at a range and some 60%, some's 40%, some's 35%. So you already have a problem out of the gate because this is not something you can internalize. Now you can, yes, practice it, and over time your gauge gets a little bit better per se. But if our premise is that learning the baseline allows us to learn how to deviate, and we're learning a really, really, really tiny part of the baseline at a very, very poor accuracy from solvers that are also created with a limited accuracy, and then we're going to make a subjective decision as to how much to deviate. Like, what are we deciding? Are we deciding that this person's 11% off from GTO, and then we're going to swing 11% the other way? And what does that 11% look like? It's all a bunch of jargon, I think, that makes us feel good, but practically speaking, it's not a realistic goal for even really elite players to accomplish at any tangible level. It's still going to come down to a lot of nuance, a lot of guesswork, a lot of subjective nature decisions. And in those situations, you're just better off learning good fundamentals in poker and focusing on the building blocks of what solid poker play looks like, especially in an exploitative environment, than trying to emulate this infinitely complex world.
So I'm gonna tag along on Chris's devil's advocacy because because I think that I tend to agree with you, Rob, right? And particularly in terms of what people should do, but that's fundamentally different from the concept of whether or not GTO is something, right? It's a matter of putting GTO as a model, right? You have all these different variables within your model that you need to do to make a prediction in terms of what the appropriate action is at the end. The problem with that model is that what you're trying to say is that some of the variables are unknown. You can't make a prediction about how, old man coffee who suddenly took Quaaludes followed by stimulants and how he's going to react when he suddenly gets ace king off, right? You don't know that variable entirely. And so the confusion in the system is not necessarily that the model is incorrect or that the model has come closer and closer to what would be exploitable in that situation. It's that the variables change. And so I think that, this is a paper that I'd like, or an article at some point I'm going to write in terms of explaining why there are statistical concepts within science in terms of analysis of experiments where people argue about the best way to do something. And then you do the math and it's like, it's the same thing. It's the same thing with GTO versus exploitable play, is that you're just simply changing the variables to a slight degree. And if you could figure out a perfect range for each individual, you would have a GTO for each individual person as well. And I know I'm not explaining it very well, but I think you're absolutely right that people need to not worry so much about GTO because they'll never have the time to be able to put it into play. But I don't know that I would take away entirely to say, it's garbage, because I do think that there are aspects of how the model, when it's done correctly, can help understand how those concepts underlie what we're doing, and it can apply to how other people would play in those situations. Does that make sense?
It does. I think the difference is it is marketed in our industry as the premier go-to destination for poker training.
Mm-hmm.
The vast majority of poker training is either use the solver and get better, or learn from somebody that's used the solver and get better. And again, if you have infinite time to study and infinite time to look at solves and infinite time to do hand histories and all of that stuff, then it can be a tool that can help you get better at the game. And there's definitely plenty of examples of that within our industry.
Right.
If you're an average person with a wife and kids and a family and a job and all of these responsibilities, the idea that you can study GTO for an hour or two a week and become a crusher by the end of the year is just not very practical. Or at the very least, it's way less inefficient than if you were to just learn core concepts that can kind of help you assemble GTO kind of in your own way, versus trying to do it through memorizing every single situation you look at. And I don't think people understand how quickly GTO gets off the rails. Like, say you look at a button versus big blind spot, right? You defended the big blind and you were facing this big river bet and you're trying to figure out whether you made the right decision or not. Well, right out of the gate, if your opponent's not opening king 5 offsuit from the button, well, now the input range that you're using is wrong. And if you're not 3-betting with the percentage that you're supposed to be 3-betting versus that, then all of your pre-flop stuff is wrong. And then if post-flop, your opponent is not paying attention to suits and backdoor suits and blockers and unblockers, then their c-betting range, like, it just literally explodes off the rails to the point where what you get in the end on the river has literally no context to the actual situation. And so, I was going to say, so that to me makes people feel very comfortable. Like, I feel like it creates a security blanket for people, when in reality, they're not learning something relevant to their situation. And that's where the overrated comes for me, is people put a lot of time and effort into this only to get a very different picture of the world than the one that they live in.
Well, and we think, and I was just going to follow up, and I don't want to, drag this through, but I do think that, again, it's like when you're looking at a scientific model that you're using, it's like you create the model, right? You're going to run and you're going to do all these things, and you have this perfect model. You say it's going to work exactly. And then all of a sudden, this variable comes out of nowhere that you had no idea was going to influence what was going to happen. In the same way, at the poker table, your understanding of, I love it when players say, well, they would never do something there. And I'm like, yeah, they will. You just don't know that they just love 10-3 offsuit, which of course is everybody's favorite hand now, right? And it's like nobody ever is going to bet 10-3 offsuit until this guy got married on October 3rd, right? And he's betting 10-3 offsuit every single time it comes into his hands. It's a variable you can't account for in the model that screws the model up. It just doesn't mean the model is bad, because the model has some validity in terms of going forward. But it's not useful to understand that, as you said, because it's not going to apply, because you may have to take into account other variables as being more important, which, if I may, is kind of what you're saying in terms of your approach. It's like, these are the things you want to focus on, not on this other stuff. Am I hitting the mark?
Yeah. I mean, if you want to dig a 6-inch hole in your backyard, an excavator is a really effective tool, but you're not going to pay $15,000 to roll an excavator into your backyard and put it in position and dig a 6-inch hole. You're going to go to your garage and get a shovel. And to me, that's the nature of GTO. It is a tool, but just because it can be effective doesn't mean it's efficient.
And I was going to add something, as someone who watches a lot of live streams from various buy-in levels, something I would honestly say, I don't know, this is just an observation I've noticed, that the lower the buy-in, or on the flip side, the higher the buy-in, it seems the more the play is more GTO. Does that make any sense? Like, on the lower buy-ins, I'm watching streams. Like, I'll be honest, I was watching the Irish Poker Open, and some of this, I wouldn't, especially one, excuse me, one player in particular, I'm pretty sure he wasn't playing GTO and didn't give a damn about GTO. And whereas you watch Triton and some of the plays that they make, I assume these guys are well more studied in GTO because they're playing other players that are well studied and well versed in GTO. Do you see what I'm getting, or does that make any sense?
I think right now, and I hate saying this because I always say that you can't tell who the best person in the game is, but if we had to make a guess as to who the best player in the game is right now, you have to pick Alex Foxen. Oh. And Alex Foxen probably knows GTO
inside now.
Probably one of the top 5 or 10 GTO players in the world. Mm-hmm. He still uses a fair amount of exploitative play in Tritons, in high rollers, in games. Chance Corna, similar. He doesn't quite play as much of the high stakes as Alex does, but they're kind of from the same branch. Yeah, they know it, and it's valuable to know it for the stakes they're in, but they're not playing it 100% of the time. Mm-hmm. And what's fascinating in what I've seen, even in the mid to high stakes I play online, is there's a lot of players who think they're GTO players, and they've spent a lot of time studying, but they still have these massive leaks. One of the most common leaks I see is these GTO players know their GTO calling ranges, and they'll call you down with third pair, and they'll call you down with fourth pair, but they're terrible at the GTO raises. They don't get to the obscure, underbelly gut shot check raise on the river when they're underbelly. Like, they just don't get to the raises that aren't very intuitive. And so when you have a player that's playing GTO calling ranges, but their GTO raising ranges are extremely weak or very value heavy, guess what? There are a lot of ways to take advantage of that player. Even though they're a good player, even though they're probably beating up on the weaker players, even though they have a great ROI, it's still a major leak because they're trying to implement this game that's so massive, but they're so stuck on only the parts of it that they can internalize and implement. So I don't think you're going to find anybody playing pure GTO 100% of the time, at least not if they're one of the best in the world. If they're playing pure 100% GTO 100% of the time, they're leaving money on the table.
So we'll let's get to some alternatives in just a second and talk about some of the educational studying stuff. No. But I just
can you tell I'm a little passionate about this?
Yeah, no, this is good. It's good. I want to remind
my job was to poke the bear. I was supposed to.
Yeah. I love it. I love getting the bear poked.
It's good to get the bear poked. But yeah, I just want to remind our audience.
Joe had one job.
Just want to remind our audience, if you have any YouTube questions, type them in the chat, and we'll be sure to include you in the conversation. And then stick around for the end of the show for our food bank raffle, where we will be giving away a prize. But Rob, so okay, all the training out there is GTO based. You're saying maybe that's not the best use of our time. You've built a course that is called Ramp Up Poker. That may be the alternative, or maybe what. So tell us about it. How does it approach things differently?
Yeah, so there's a couple things I wanted to do different from everything that was out there. One, I wanted to break training into short videos. I think that the average attention span, especially in the social media world, myself included, is a lot shorter than it was, 50, 60 years ago. So to sit down and watch a 60, 90, 2-hour long training video just isn't practical in today's world, or at least not in a way where you can really give full focus. And so a lot of times people will try to watch a video that long, and they'll have to take breaks, and then you have to go back and rewatch what you watched before and get a refresher before you go into the second part of the video. It's overwhelming. So I wanted to create something that was bite-sized, 10, 12, 14 minutes, one concept, something that you could easily retain and then think throughout the day on. If you're at work, if you're at your job, at school, whatever, you could kind of let that work in the back of your head and give yourself a chance to really wrap your head around it and then go and implement it, versus these huge chunks that are really difficult to understand. And then I really wanted to build something that, rather than trying to teach people this really complex system, give them a baseline and give them a few simple decisions to make for when to deviate from that baseline. And so I spent the time kind of charting out pre-flop, flop, turn, river, essentially like what a complex decision system would look like, and then simplifying it down. Like, what do they really need to know? Like, even in the GTO world, right? You can look up a solver and you can look at all of the different bet sizes, and the EV difference between different bet sizes is negligible, right? And yet people will stress about like 33, 66, 100, 125, so on and so forth. So I felt like if I could put a system together and easily communicate a couple of options, a couple of variables, and a core baseline around each spot, people could then enjoy the game more because they didn't have to memorize hundreds and hundreds of things. They could feel confident while they were playing, and the strategy would be effective and work. And so that's what I really did. I built a course that was about 60-ish videos, all 15 minutes or less. It's broken down into 3 sections. We've got our core foundational pieces that kind of help people get the building blocks. It actually kind of teaches a little bit of GTO, I guess, if you will, but not looking at solvers, not looking at memorization charts, just like core principles, like, hey, the smaller our opponent bets, the more raises we get to have, the more calls we get to have, just abstract concepts that are easy to understand so people could start to bring these things together to make their own conclusions. Then we go through the situations and we break down, like I said, pre-flop, flop, turn, river. We kind of go through every spot and give people these baselines to use. And then we have this fun section called moves, which is basically fun exploits that I've learned over the years. Some of them I've been taught, some of them I've created myself, that are very effective ways to take advantage of weaker players, just to give people some fun weapons to use, right? Like, I think part of this is education in poker is miserably exhausting and boring, and we need to make poker fun again. We got to get back to that place where poker's fun to play. And so having some cool moves that you can just, learn in a 10-minute video and then try at your local home game or your local card room and feel like you have these kind of competitive attacks you can use makes the game more fun, and it makes you more competitive without making learning the game this miserably exhausting experience.
I like it. And then, to kind of correspond or go along with that, do you still study yourself? And if so, how do you study?
Oh boy. And the one question I didn't want to get asked.
Let's go.
So brutal honesty here. I'm going to get roasted for this answer, but I don't care. I haven't studied in 18 months. And my graph has soared in the last 18 months. And here's why. The reason my game has grown in the last 18 months without doing any studying is when you get these foundational pieces in place and you really understand the building blocks of how poker works, the games you play are the classroom. Because you now are seeing situations, you're understanding. It's kind of similar to the premise that I guess Chris and Joe, you both brought it up, is like you want the premise is we want to see where people are deviating and then make adjustments, right? But the deviations, like, that's not something that a solver is going to teach you. That's not something that a range is going to teach you. It's as simple as a situation where it's like, okay, well, if my opponent never raises, how do I get to take advantage of that now? Well, shoot, if they're never going to raise, I can bet really small with my draws and actually give myself direct equity to get there. That sounds pretty sick. Well, if they're never going to raise, when I have a really strong value hand, I can get really aggressive with my sizing because I want to get as much value from them as possible. Well, that sounds sick. I've got kind of a weak showdown value hand, but I still want to build a pot. I can go really small with a weak showdown. They're not going to raise, right? We get to start seeing how they react to our mistakes and start kind of testing the waters for how much we can get away with. So technically, I say I haven't studied in the last 18 months, but every tournament I play, I'm seeing these deviations. I'm seeing how these opponents are getting away from things, and I'm starting to implement the opposite. I don't need to look at a solver to do that. If my opponent starts raising too much, I start defending a little bit more and protecting my range more. If they're not raising enough, I'm going to be a little bit more, forward with my value, and I'm going to start to take advantage of smaller bets more often. It's just a lot of, I don't even want to call it trial and error because there's an intention to it. It's a lot of seeing what's happening in the meta and the everyday world, and then just constantly adapting, adjusting, and extracting more value in situations where my opponents are not adjusting correctly.
Great. Thank you. Joe, do you have a follow-up?
I have lots of follow-ups, but I'll get accused of poking the bear, or apparently choking the bear out and things like that. And I don't want to do that.
Go for it. No, go for it.
So I guess my question is in terms of teaching, because I do some teaching on my own, for my students, and there are students I have who are looking for. So we write reports, right? I have them write reports, and I can teach somebody how to write a report, and they will learn how to do exactly what that report is over and over and over again. And then there are students who I'm teaching, broader concepts and theories because they're really interested in going there. So what would you say that and poker is similar, because you can, if you want to go beat a 1-3 game, it's not like it's complicated, but it's not, right? I mean, you just play the upper left-hand corner and a few extra pairs, and then bet, win, and fold if you get too much pressure. You can win that way, but it's not really kind of describing the system. How would you say to the rec poker folks of, well, how, which way, which path should you take? Because I think that there's avenues for one path versus the other. Does that make, I don't know if I explained that correctly.
Give me the paths. Give me the paths, and I'll answer
somebody that really wants to get into the weeds about what is this game like, right? At the high level thinking versus learning a set of strategies that are going to allow you to win more frequently at the table.
So I would say it's all about order. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people get the order wrong, both out of a sense of urgency of wanting to get to the top as quickly as possible, either for the fun factor, or maybe they need to make some extra revenue on the side or whatever. If you can learn the basic foundational blocks, and this is where I really focus the first, I'd say 40% of my course, and you understand those and get those down, that will give you the foundation to go in whatever direction you want. Now, my personal biased opinion would be to go take a course like Ramp Poker and then head to someone like Faraz, who is kind of what I would consider the next tier up, one of our learning partners at RecPoker, who does a really, really good job of breaking down some of the more complex GTO concepts into heuristics. Now, that is still going to be, I would say, significantly more complex than what Ramp Poker has, because he really gets into the weeds on some of the situations and nuance. But for people that want to get to that level, I think he does a really good job with that. Now, none of that involves signing up for a subscription for GTO Wizard, right? Like, I think you could spend 2 months going through the Ramp Poker course, spend a year on Faraz, and still never need to look at a solver. And I think that path would be incredibly elite for people that were serious about getting to a high level of this game. And then at that point, but first off, if you've done that and you've done your due diligence, you're probably crushing poker at this point, because you can see what he's done with a lot of his students. If you're at that point and then you decide you want to get GTO Wizard and go into the weeds and look at 8,000 solves and node lock to death and all that, go for it. But literally, I think you could get to a place where you were crushing up to 1600s live and up to 109s and 215s online, and never, ever look at at one single solver chart during your education. Actually, I know that's true, because I know people that have done it.
I think that's certainly possible. But I guess the question I would have, though, is that at times, well, let me ask it in a question form. Would you think that there's some benefit to programs like GTO Wizard, right, who are extremely complex, they're very expensive, and I get all that, and I regularly join up to GTO Wizard, then I shut it down because I just don't have time to really make use of all of it. But that it can push you out of your what would you say to somebody who say, well, this pushes me out of my, it gives me reps and an opportunity to be pushed out of my comfort zone to make plays that I might not do because I just can't get the reps at my local casino playing 30 hands an hour to know that these things are going to work. Does that make sense?
I think the problem is that people misapply the things that they do. I've seen people do exactly what you're trying to talk about. They're trying to get out of the comfort zone. They're trying to get more aggressive. They're trying to learn how to bluff. And what ends up happening is it's kind of like somebody watching Michael Jordan on television and then going to their park and being like, well, I'm just going to start dunking on people and like shooting 3-pointers and like doing these sick fadeaways like Jordan because I watched him do it. And so now that I've seen how he does it, I can do the same thing. Right. And the problem is, again, there is so much to a triple barrel bluff. There is so much to a check raise bluff. There's so much information that GTO Wizard just goes blah, 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 and spits out that we can't begin to implement. That what ends up happening is those players, yeah, they might get out of their comfort zone a little bit more, but now they're just like blindly check raising in spots that aren't even remotely close to the situations they are supposed to or aren't supposed to. So if the sole question is just, can it help people be more aggressive? Yes. Can it help people be more aggressive in a way that's actually beneficial to their game? In most of the situations I've seen, no. I've actually seen it make people's games a lot worse because they don't have all the variables and the understanding of when they're actually supposed to use it. It's just kind of one of those, oh, I remember a time where the solver did this. I'm going to try it here. And there's not really any like thought process about why they should or why they shouldn't try it in that specific spot.
Okay. Do you run into a lot of, do you find when you're talking to people about this that they tend to overly cling to one idea or the other? Do you find people, I mean, you actually kind of said that in GTO you see that. Do you see the reverse though? Oftentimes in terms of your play with people, you played a ton more poker than I have. So
I think that there is another issue here that I'm really passionate about that may start another can of worms. I wish everybody in the poker world could take one day, just 24 hours, and really come to terms with whether they want to have fun in poker or whether they want to make money in poker. And I know everybody says they want to do both. I get it. Yeah, we all would love to have fun in poker and make money in poker. But the reality of the situation is there's a lot of aspects of the road to making money in poker that's not fun. And a lot of people just try to ride the fence of, well, I want poker to be fun, but I want to make money, but I want to have fun. And they never really get to a place where they fully get to do both. And one of the ways that manifests in a lot of poker players is this idea that everybody wants to outplay their opponent. And that this game of poker is some sort of willpower. I'm going to outplay you. I'm going to outmaneuver you. I'm going to outthink you. I'm going to outcraft you type game. And that mentality literally pays my bills, because people are always trying to like outmaneuver their opponent. They're trying to figure out a way that they can get them to fold a big hand, or they can make this really sick bluff call. And it just leads to a lot of behaviors that are very, very negative EV. And if you want to do those things because they're fun, go for it. Like, I want people to embrace that. I don't want this to be a game where if you want to triple barrel bluff with deuce 8 off, you should get ridiculed for it. Have the guts to do it and live it up. But don't do that and then in the same breath be like, well, I want to make a living playing this game in the next 3 months. Because it ain't going to happen, Captain. You know what I'm saying? Like, those are two parallel worlds. And I always struggle. Like, I've had students in the past where it's like, they're starting to learn things, but they just can't get out of this concept of wanting to outplay their opponents. It just bleeds into every decision they make, and it makes that world ineffective. And this is, I think, one of the challenges with GTO is for people in that situation, it feeds the bear. It throws gasoline on the fire because they want to have these really sexy, unique plays like they've seen on, poker television 10 years ago. And here comes this GTO chart. It's like, oh, you can totally 2x pot bluff the river with 9 high. And then they go, sweet. And they start doing it in their cash games, not understanding that the reason it's doing with 9 high is because it's double blocking this hand and it's unblocking that hand and it's high enough in the range. And so all of these factors, they just see the 9 high and then now they're just like throwing it out there. So I think that's a big thing that a lot of people struggle with. And if we could just get people to pick a lane, they would be so much more happier either way.
Well, and people are going to say we're disagreeing, and I actually don't think we all disagree all that much.
No.
One of the things I would say is that when I first came into the poker sphere, I was astounded at how frequently, I was reading stuff telling me I had to play 25,000 hands in a year. Otherwise, I really wasn't ever going to do anything with the game. And I'm like, well, I don't have time to do that. It didn't make any sense to me. And choosing what it is that you want from the game is going to give you an idea of what happiness will be in terms of that outcome. And sometimes they're coordinated, right? But for instance, my playing of the game has nothing to do with either making money or outplaying my opponents, because I'm terrible at poker. And you don't have to agree so quickly.
You kicked my ass in the March Madness, so I don't know what you're talking about. I didn't even get out of the first round.
He did agree pretty quickly, didn't he?
It's in the ether now. But I'm not doing it to make money. It's a puzzle for me, right? I want to learn about things. I want to do that. So that's what makes me happy about it. And GTO solvers are great for that purpose, because you can take it and say, okay, well, mathematically, this is the model we're looking at and how that works. But that's just not for everybody. And I would agree with you. I just don't think that it's really what everybody wants to do with their time, because to get as good as GTO would require you to be, like to be an Ike Haxton or some other people that really understand this, you would have to devote all of your time to it. And I don't think most people are up to that task. And so therefore the approach to give you props for the system that you're setting up is it is more accessible to people, rather than having to learn what a solver is, which most people don't understand. They really, I barely have the concept of how the whole thing runs. And I have a PhD with statistical background, things like that. I'm not trying to brag about it. It's like I still struggle with it. So to expect everybody else to really understand what the solver is doing is probably not realistic. And something that you're offering is a much better approach to particularly either starting, but also to understand how you can get what you want out of the game. So
the why is always more valuable than the what.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I want to have us shift gears a little and talk a little bit about some industry stuff and some strategy stuff. And I think Lorianne had some questions to jump in here.
I do. Thanks again, Chris. Hey, for those who may not have seen the latest.
Sorry, Lorianne, I couldn't resist.
That's okay. See, you can't see my hands right now, but I'm giving you both fingers at the moment.
It's well deserved. For those that don't know, Lorianne has just dominated me every time we've played live poker, and this is my only way of getting back at her, because I don't know the next time I'm going to play in Vegas. So,
as long as I don't flop a set of fours, turn a boat, and lose to a bigger boat on the river.
Yeah, I think it was bad luck to you.
Oh my God, I still have nightmares about, like I said twice, but that's a whole nother thing. Anyway, what I was going to ask, bringing back bad memories there. For those who may not have seen the latest vlog that you put out earlier today, can you please share some of the tips you wish you knew when you started playing poker?
Yeah, I think that it's funny. I've recorded that video 7 weeks ago, so I don't remember the exact points I had in that video when I put it together. But I can just kind of answer the question in general. I really wish that I had slowed down and given myself more grace in poker. I think that when I first got into the game, I was such motivation. I was a very competitive person. I wanted to get to the top. I wanted to prove myself. I wanted the respect of my peers, that I just put intense amounts of pressure on myself. And that forced me to do a bunch of like really bad studying, because I was studying way too long and I was trying to learn too much too fast. And I really didn't get to enjoy as much of the early parts of my career as I probably should have. Some of that might have had to been with the fact that I decided to quit my job and start a full-time poker career with $1,000 bankroll, and then like you use that $1,000 the worst way possible by playing steps and literally putting $1,000 into step ones and playing through them, and whatever I got in my step sixes was my bankroll for the next month. I was in too much of a hurry, and that took the fun out of the game for me very, very early on. And I think that was a huge mistake. So giving yourself the grace to understand you have time, this game's not going anywhere. All the people that are telling you that the game's getting, man, maybe the game's not easy in the same way as it was 15 years ago, but these games are still beatable. Like this game is not getting more difficult to beat. So give yourself the grace and time to learn the game. Learn bankroll management very early on. Nobody wants to learn bankroll management, but it will, when you really learn how to apply yourself and protect your bankroll, it actually frees you up to have more opportunities, not less. It feels like a restrictive thing, but it's actually a thing that opens up opportunities. Get your mental, emotional game down. One of the huge shifts in my career was when Ryan and KL, I was in a coaching deal with Ryan LaPlante, who had a massive impact on my game. Really helped me take my game to the next level. And they kind of finally sat me down. I was like, dude, you got to stop with this like crying and whining on your stream and screaming and wanting to throw things every time you get a bad beat. You need a mental game coach. And pulled me into they actually helped pay for a mental game coach, and I started doing meditation. I thought meditation was the weirdest thing in the world, but I just was like, all right, I'm going to try it. It was amazing. And there's a lot of science behind it. Again, Joe could probably explain it better than I could. The impacts it had both in my poker game and my life as a whole. So getting those things under wraps, I think, is really important. And then just honestly, like, again, like, don't get, I don't want to go back to the previous conversation. Don't get caught up in all of these high level, really complex courses and sites and ways of learning poker. You have to learn a style of poker that actually fits you. You have to be able to wear the style and implement the style and use the style. And if you just chase what the cool, latest high stakes guy is doing in this industry, you can learn some cool tips and tricks, and maybe you can learn some things to implement, but you're ultimately going to end up with a style that doesn't make you comfortable. It's not built around your personality. There are ways to beat this game and be tight aggressive. There are ways to beat this game and be loose aggressive. There's even some ways to beat this game and be kind of passive if you really want to. If your comfort zone is being tight aggressive, don't go out and try to learn how to use a 21% 3-bet percentage to your advantage. It's just not gonna work, at least not out of the gate, right? Like, maybe get yourself up to 4 or 5 or 6%, work your way up over time. I think those were the lessons that I think if I could start all over again, I would go back and just do those from day one instead of like year 7, year 13, year 16, and I'd probably be much farther along in my journey.
And I want to, we're kind of running low on time here, but I know we wanted to talk a little bit, and this, speaking of can of worms, I know we wanted to talk a little bit about kind of the state of the poker industry. So, and I know Lorianne has a follow-up question, it's maybe a little more specific, but if you were just to sort of characterize your perception of the state of the poker industry, today, what would be your take of it?
I've been waiting 15 years for somebody to ask me this question. I'm going to give you guys $1 million advice for 10 cents here. Anybody who does not outwardly care about the value of this industry and making this industry better is somebody you shouldn't take any advice from whatsoever. I'm so grateful for RecPoker, and I'm not like, just because I'm on the pod. I would have said this 4 years ago before I was on the pod or before I was involved with the organization. I'm so grateful for RecPoker that the pillars of this organization are committed to making this industry a better place and for giving recreational players a place to belong and be in community. Because I think that the nature of this game is such that we chase EV, and it naturally attracts people who understand what EV is and understand what's to chase it. And one of the unfortunate circumstances and consequences of that is a large percentage, not all, but a large percentage of the people that are at the top of this industry will extract every goddamn ounce of EV out of this industry they can and will suck it dry because they don't know how to do anything else. You'll see it in various conversations, like even like the debate about the WSOP in the main event. Just tons of people flying in with, here's the way it needs to be, followed by, here's what benefits me the most, with no vision beyond what's best for the casual poker player, what's best for growing the game. And you guys have probably seen many times over where we try to talk about ways to grow the game with women, with minorities, with internationals, with recreational players. And everybody gets in a huff. It's like, oh, well, this just isn't a realistic thing, blah, 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 because all they care about is their bottom line. And if it wasn't for these organizations, I really truly think poker would eventually die, because the industry is self-cannibalizing in a way that is not sustainable. So I don't think the poker industry is in a very healthy place. I don't think that, again, there are some really, really good people who care about this industry. I think they're in the minority. And I think we have to be more proactive about not giving our time, our attention, our dollars to the people who are literally trying to extract every last penny from the game they can and will never do anything to make this game better.
It's interesting that you
Is that
say
blunt
that.
enough?
Yeah, no, it's great.
It's interesting that you say that, Rob, because I was thinking about that in terms of Club WPT Gold, which right now is single tabling, right? And what that does is it keeps the people who are going to churn like 16 tables out and who are so much better than the population. And so you get just a ton of people coming in and they're playing and they seem to return. And it's kind of a fun arena. And I was thinking about this weekend that because Bart, I'm blanking on his last name from
Hansen?
Hansen was talking about that he knows that they're going to allow multi-tabling there, which means that the games will become much, much, much tougher. And it's just going to drive all of those people who don't want to have the money churned out of their pockets at such a fast rate because they don't have a chance to win it back from one another. And obviously, I'd like it to stay soft because I've been making money on that site now. But I also think that it's not just selfish. It's like, well, what's wrong with just playing one table? Most people don't want to play 16, right? And there are sites to do that, yet they're going to churn every dollar out of it because they can make better rake. Well, not better rake, but more rake from having people who are going to bring up 65 tables rather than 10. So I think you're absolutely right. Yeah.
I'm not sponsored nor endorsed by him right now, but one of my favorite sites right now is Global because of the single entry.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
It's exact. I mean, it's a little bit different, but it's the same concept. It's just, there's single entry, so you don't have people entering the same tournament 8 times. It makes a difference.
Mm-hmm. So more specifically about the poker industry, Lorianne, you had a question about some sort of news that have been going on in the poker world this week.
I don't know. I think it's actually more of a question for Rob, and it's your opinion or no opinion on the recent Nacho Barbero ACR hot mic situation that happened during this past week during the U.S. Poker Open. His conversation with Isaac Haxon. You have any opinion on that?
Yeah. So here's what I want
opinion that you'd like to share. Didn't mean to cut you off because I know you've got an opinion. No.
I think that, like a lot of organizations in poker, there are a lot of people who have good intentions. Okay. We also know what good intentions are worth. Do I think that Phil has good intentions for the poker world, wants to make the poker world a better place, wants to help grow the game? Yeah, I think in his head, he genuinely wants to do that. Do they have the team in place to make that happen? It's really hard to justify saying yes in any way or capacity. I think that they kind of have an echo chamber over there where they have an inner circle and that inner circle works on what they work on and they all tell each other they're doing a good job. And when the poker world says, no, you're not, it becomes this big, oh, how could you say that? We're working so hard. We're putting in so much effort. We're trying so hard. And the reality is this is not, tiddlywinks. This is not Legos. This is a massive billion-dollar industry where you are protecting people's money. And you should have the same level of professionalism that a bank has, right? And unfortunately, it's just kind of a world where, Phil's stuck in Costa Rica. He can't come to the United States, or he won't come to the United States. And I think that he works with all of his closest friends. I think he works with his his social life is ACR. And that creates some challenges. Now, look, when I ran my first business, I ran a web development company. We worked in a basement. I hired a bunch of people from Walmart, and we would put in extra hours on the nights and weekends. And while we were working, we fired up an old Nintendo game called Tecmo Bowl on the screen, and we had tournaments and we had fun. I'm all for the like come to work in your pajamas and be laid back and do some things outside the box. That being said, there's certain aspects of every business that just you cannot tinker with. And in an industry like poker, especially, security, PR, public communication, and transparency are all non-negotiable. And I'm just going to be honest, like I tried to pitch them so goddamn hard on better transparency. I wrote multiple proposals about helping them with tech. I used to be a CTO, helping them with PR. I'd worked in those areas before, all of those areas. And they did what they had a right to do, which was like, nah, appreciate it, but no thanks. We don't want your help. Okay. You guys can see what the result of that is.
I'm dying to know who's in charge of their PR. I have to be honest with you. It's just
I think you could really figure it out if you gave it a little bit of a thought. I don't know. They might have a PR group now. Who knows? But like again, you can see what's happening. It's not hard to see. It's not hard to read between the lines on what's going on with all of this stuff. Now, look, I played on ACR on Sunday. I don't put a lot of volume in there because I think the games are way harder than other sites. But I trust having some money on there. I trust playing a little bit on there. I know that when I play on ACR, my ROI is going to be about a third of what it is on every other site. I'll play on there occasionally because they have some really, really big fields and I can do some shot taking. So do I think the site is safe? Do I think your money's safe? It's there. Absolutely. I've never had issues with the cash out. Do I think those people mean well? I think they do for the most part. Are they an elite organization that's doing things at a high level? Fuck no. And that is not going to change until they get different people involved in the project. And there's just no evidence that that's ever going to happen. That being said, you can poke holes in every online site that's out there, including Club WPT Gold, who I have a lot of respect for the people involved there. Their Twitter account probably needs a little work. I don't think it's a very good look for the poker industry. I think it looks really shitty for a brand that's been the top shelf elite, creme de la creme to come down and act like I don't even know what you want to call it, but like they're coming down, they're acting like ACR. So they all have their problems. And I don't think anybody should immediately feel like they can't play on a certain site because of this or that or the other. But this industry is where it's at because Black Friday happened. And when Black Friday happened, every corporation left the space and a whole bunch of people with no business experience came in and filled in the gap. And we have all these companies running around with people that don't understand how business operates. They don't understand how PR operates. They don't understand the technology. And they're just out there wheeling and dealing. It's the wild, wild west of the poker industry. And that's why some of the poker sites the way they are. That's why you go to poker news sites and we continue to put cheaters and scammers up for clicks and views rather than actually highlighting competent, intelligent, passionately exciting people in our poker space. It's not changing because these people don't understand how the bigger world works. And we're just kind of stuck in this cesspool that I hope gets better, but I don't know. I'm not optimistic.
Appreciate the honesty.
Yeah, I appreciate the honesty too. I could listen to you talk about the industry for a long, long time, but I am again calling the clock on us. I think this has been a really great conversation, Rob. And before we kind of exit, I just want to remind everyone you can start typing food bank into the YouTube chat to be eligible for our giveaway. And Rob, before we say goodbye, if people are interested in learning a little bit more about some of your offerings, some of the Ramp Up Poker, what's the best way to find those things, to reach out to you, to get in touch, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, I gotta get these names in the wheel while we're doing this. So bear with me here.
Come on, Jess. Hurry up. Do your work.
Yeah, let's go. What? You can't guest and produce at the same time? I'm
Rob Gardner live on all my socials. For now, I'm putting out daily strategy videos on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. Shorts. So if you want some shorter form versions of what we've been talking about today, I think I've been doing it since Jan 1. So there's probably, almost 100 videos up there and more going up daily. If you're interested in the Ramp Poker course, don't go to the website. Head over to the Rec Poker website. Go to the Learning with Partners page. You'll see the Ramp Poker course there, and go through there. If you're a premium member, you'll get a discount on the course. And if you're not, you'll still give Rec Poker credit, which we all appreciate. But yeah, and you can reach out to me on any of my socials. I'm happy to engage in conversations, answer questions, or if you just want to debate anything I said on here, feel free to bring your best shots. I've had a lot of time to think about it, so I'm ready to go.
I do want to say, I had a chance to review some of the videos, and I know I've had fun poking at the bear today. It's actually something I like to do a lot. But go check it out. I know it's shocking.
No.
Shocking.
No, listen, Joe, I want you to know.
But I want to say first, they're really great videos. I really want people to understand
Appreciate that.
It's a great way to go through it. So, anyway.
I love the bear because I think that anytime, and if the poker industry had more of this, we'd be in a better place. Anytime you want to take a strong stand, you should be willing to listen to counter arguments and be able to work through other strong points. If you can't do that, then you're just kind of you're bluffing, right? Like you're going out and throwing some chips in and praying your opponent folds versus actually having some meat to what you're saying. So I'm never offended by those things. They happen all the time on my social media accounts. I actually have a few GTO instructors that have come through and just literally like gone through 20 of my videos and dropped comments complaining about every single one, not understanding that that's boosting me in the algorithm and just cranking my content out more. So no, I love having different viewpoints, and I think it's healthy to do that. And if we had more of that, maybe people wouldn't be blindly walking into one path or the other. They'd be able to make a more educated decision for themselves, because not every person should take the same path.
Sounds like a plan.
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic. Well, Rob, I hope you'll be back and maybe we can talk more about the industry. It's fun to talk to you and have this conversation. I appreciate you being on the show tonight.
Yeah.
Sure thing. I'm going to go back into my producer role, and I'll see you guys soon.
All right. And I'm going to turn.
Thanks, Rob.
Thanks, Rob. I'm going to turn this over to John Somsky. We've got some home game results to talk about.
Yes, we do. And we'll start off with the Go for the Gold tournament. This is a tournament that we hold once a year for all of the silver pin winners. And if you've ever won a silver pin any way at all, you are, even if it's an asterisk, you are entitled to play in the Go for the Gold series, which right now is the only way to earn a gold pin. And on April 16th, East Coast bidder Ben Enslow won the Go for the Gold tournament, becoming the third Go for the Gold winner.
Wow, let's go. You should get I feel like you need a gold jacket with that to put the pin on or something.
Yes, I would encourage Ben to get one that will not be provided by rec.poker.
Fair.
Then on April 14th, East Coast bidder Ben Enslow got his second nightly victory for the year. Maddie Bumpo, Kathleen Twomey, got her fourth nightly victory for the year. Carl 0621, Carl Anderson, got his third nightly victory for the year. E. Anderson 85, Eric Anderson, got his fifth nightly victory for the year and his 49th lifetime victory. Apple O' My Eye, Harold Berry, got his second nightly victory for the year. And then E. Anderson 85, Eric Anderson, got his sixth nightly victory for the year, his 50th lifetime victory, earning the Silver Lifetime Achievement Award. The
650.
Congratulations. What a week, man. Lots of achievements there.
Well, and this is the second week in a row we've had a Silver Lifetime victory.
Wow.
So last week it was Keck Geek Senior, and now it's E. Anderson 85.
And Keck Geek Junior's stuck, he's at
49 right now.
49. So okay, he's fighting his way in. Okay, fair enough.
I mean, we may need to get 3 more people to start recording results just to start recording Silver Lifetime Achievement winners now, because we're really starting to roll into them.
Wow.
Then for our mixed events, K-Poker wannabe Ron Payton got his first daily mixed practice event victory this year. Bloop 7 got his second international victory of the year. Keto Man 335, Kian Tavakoli, got his first international victory for the year. And MCF Jack McFarland, won the LPP event, so he can contact info@rec.poker for his free month at Learn Pro Poker.
Congratulations to everyone on the winners. We're going to turn to our giveaway now. I don't think I actually said this week, but this week you're playing. I'll give you a few more seconds while I read about the giveaway. You're getting a giveaway for a free month at pokercoaching.com. So this week is our Learning with Partners video is from Poker Coaching. Continuing the theme from April, Jonathan Little describes polar, linear, and condensed ranges and what makes a range capped or uncapped. And if you'd like more of this type of content through Rec Poker, hover on the resources, choose Learning Partners, and then choose pokercoaching.com from the drop-down menu. But yeah, that's what we're playing for tonight. So let's spin the wheel.
The wheel.
That's really small.
That's
with only
slow.
4 of us. Let me go to the full.
Oh, there we go.
That's a really slow wheel.
Hold on.
Clock.
Better. Okay, there we go.
We're not getting any
All
faster.
right.
Oh, there we are.
The GTO way to have set this up would have been
Yeah.
There we go. Asinine Bovine. Congratulations.
Congratulations.
You can contact info@rec.poker.
info@rec.poker.
All right, cool. And you can claim your prize that way. So with that, any final thoughts before we get out of here, folks? Well, I want to thank the Running Aces Hotel, Racetrack, and Casino. I want to thank the audience for joining us. I want to thank Joe, Lorianne, John, and of course, Rob Gardner for being our guest and producer. And thanks to everyone for tuning in. We couldn't do this without you. We'll see you next time on the RecPoker Podcast.
Bye, everybody.